Hello there and welcome to our monthly TMC webinar. This month we're going to focus on diverse and dispersed teaming. And I'm happy to join you today. My name is Lynne Putz, and I look forward to exploring this topic with you today. Really it's a timely topic for more and more dispersed work groups having to work together across differences, across borders, and across boundaries. So really excited to dive in with you today. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. And that is really in order to reduce background noise and throughout the presentation will be muted throughout the webinar. So if you have questions, we have a question box, and we hope that you're able to use that. You can also type questions into that question box at any time. So let's say I mentioned something and you specifically have a question about that. Go ahead and use the question box right away. And as we pause or as we transition, we'll check that question box and monitor it for any queries that you might have. And then today's session is being recorded. And after the webinar, we'll share the link with you. It will also be posted on our corporate website, tmcorp.com. All right, without further ado, let's get started. We first want to find out who's on the line with us today. So we have a quick poll, and we're first trying to figure out who's on the line. So what is your role within your organization? Is it talent management or organizational development? Perhaps you're in the training line of business, or you're a business line leader. If other, go ahead and type it into the question box. So we're trying to find out who's on the line and what your role is. All right, so we have mostly other. Okay, interesting. So let's take a look at what other is when we have a second. But we have some business line leaders and training professionals on the line with us today. So really appreciate you being here with us. Take a look at our agenda real quick. We're going to first introduce diverse and dispersed teaming around the world. So you might say, wow, what is there to know about diverse and dispersed teaming? Well, we've aggregated some numbers from around the world in terms of who is using mobile technology, who comprises the diverse and dispersed workforce around the world. So we'll look at some numbers. We'll look at also linguistic requirements for these diverse and dispersed teams. And then we'll look at, of course, the cultural complexity that comes with the diverse and dispersed teams structure. Our second item is going to be around virtual reality. And we're going to look at some trends and those roadblocks to engagements that emerge from those trends. And then we're going to look at the high demand skills, and we're seeing these skills become more and more important as the digital workforce really starts having to engage across differences. And so we'll look at 4 high demand skills. And then we'll look at, how to keep collaborating and how to keep managing within the diverse and dispersed work environment. So we have a no feed connect kind of construct that we'll introduce to you. We'll look at some strategies for managing the impact of technology, and then do a quick analysis tool for improving global diverse and dispersed team performance. Now, D&D does not mean Dungeons and Dragons in this situation. It means diverse and dispersed. I think I just evaluated my own age there with you, or shared a little bit of my own age with you. All right, so some of you may have seen this fantastic video by Tripp and Tyler on the internet, and if you don't have familiarity with it, we provide the YouTube link for you. It's called A Conference Call in Real Life, and it's a fabulous kind of introduction for this topic, and really looking at the realities of having to rely on virtual technologies and the somewhat unpredictable nature of that. And still trying to be productive and efficient and effective in the work that we do. So we're not going to show it for the purposes of copyright, but I wanted to make sure that you understood Tripp and Tyler is a conference call in real life. It's a comedy, and it's only, I think, 7 minutes. So it's definitely worth your time. So my question to you is kind of our second poll, and that is, how does your organization harness the power of diverse and dispersed teams? So looking for you to kind of give us your ideas or your input as to what your organization is doing to really focus on the diverse and dispersed team structures that are becoming more and more important. So is it training of team leads? Are you training the team members? Are you relying on on-the-job mentoring and coaching, or is there something else that your organization is doing? So love to see your comments and get your examples. And let's see, on-the-job mentoring and coaching, yeah, for sure. On-the-job, if we follow the 70-20-10 rule, that is the 70% of all of our training and all of our learning does happen on the job, and then the training, formal training is only really about 10% if we follow the 70-20-10 rule, 20% being through our collaborative work environment with the colleagues that we work with. So, and in terms of the other, I'll go ahead and look at the question box here in a little bit and reflect on that as we go. So thanks for that. Really, on-the-job mentoring and coaching is how we're really focused on delivering value to our organization with the diverse and dispersed team. So thanks for that. Really great. So let me just kind of start with some numbers. And really the reality of the global workforce is that employers must now turn their attention to tapping into knowledge and expertise without boundaries of location or proximity. Marcia McLuhan, who is a communications scholar, really coined a term that I think is still very relevant. In 1967, he coined the term global village. Well, it's becoming more and more important for us to be members and participating members of the global village in the interconnected world in which we work every single day. And really, we live in a digitally enhanced, interconnected, follow the sun, always on knowledge age. And it's really foundationally supported by communication. And the communication happens through technology. So really, it's called ICT, Information and Communication Technology. And it's really taking the form of the internet. More dynamically and growing is the mobile devices. Technological enhancements flood the markets in the form of trackers and wearables as the technology gets smaller and cheaper. Change is accelerating. Uniformity is giving way to diversity. Complexity that the future presents is very concerning to the responsible citizen and to the responsible business leader. Globalization and the rapidly evolving workforce is redefining how we think about cohesion, collaboration, consensus, cooperation, and truly cultural competence. And that's really what we call the 5 C's of high-performing teams that we'll work on later in a quick assessment. These diverse teams operate in a dispersed environment where remote work arrangements are gaining traction, and they're gaining a reputation for making employees much happier. So according to the International Data Corporation's annual tracker, Europe has the lowest percentage of mobile workers with only 12%, followed by Asia, which is minus Japan at 19%. Americas has 22% saturation of mobile workers, with the highest mobile worker saturation being in Japan at 65%. So think about that. They're working off of their mobile phones. With this emerging mobile workforce reality in mind, we as employees have to hone our skills to operate in the global environment where the pace is fast and the relationships are virtual. According to Oxford Economics, the highest demand skills for the diverse and dispersed teams really over the next 5 to 10 years are really 4. Digital skills, and it includes the ability to work virtually. Agile thinking skills, which includes the ability to be dynamic in our processing of information. Interpersonal and communication skills, which includes virtual teaming. And global operating skills, which includes the ability to dynamically shift as necessary based on the areas of the world that you're operating. Jeffrey Immelt, the chairman and CEO of GE, really contends that organizations will have to be able to advance from globalization efforts, which is, yesterday's language, globalization efforts, which is tailoring global products and brands to the local markets, to the concept of reverse innovation. So what does that mean? Really, reverse innovation means Innovation is led from emerging markets and brought back home to mature markets. Now that's the head of GE saying that. We have some serious work ahead of us to prepare our workforce for thinking outside the box in that way. With the dispersed and diverse workforce increasingly important, the need for this redistribution of key skill sets has arrived. So let's take a look at those skill sets in depth just a little bit through this webinar. I want to take a second really to think about the factors that influence the virtual team structure before we get into those 4 key skills. And that is, first, cross-border collaboration is a critical skill, but cultural traditions most often get in the way. I have a great story from an organization, a technology organization in Silicon Valley that I worked with, where they were following the sun with their business process, and they'd hand off, and quite often the handoff would not be successful. They'd get no progress or minimal progress from their teams in India in this particular situation. And what they failed to consider is that a wedding takes 5 days out of the work day, the work week, excuse me, and there were a number of weddings happening. And it was during the Diwali season, so one of their major holidays was also happening at that same time. So they failed to think about the cultural traditions that were very unique to that environment. And that was what was getting in the way in that situation. And so, they had to do some due diligence to really understand what cultural traditions were coming into play in the business cycles. Let's take a look at linguistics. So really 25% of the global workforce is expected to speak a language other than their native tongue. I was just reading about the head of Nissan and Renault automaker, and he speaks 4 languages. The head of Coca-Cola speaks a number of languages. Dynamic linguistic capability is crucial to work cross-border. Being able to flex your style and flex your cultural understanding based on your ability to speak that language is key and essential. It's not just being able to speak the language, it's understanding the culture in a way that you can only understand when you speak that language is really coming into play as well. Finally, in terms of the factors that influence virtual teams is security risks. And the one security risk that stands out above all else is BYOD. BYOD, bring your own device to work. It is an unofficial, unwritten policy for many multinationals. Only 38% of all multinationals across the world have an official policy on what you can use, what you can access with your own device. Everyone else has no policy around it or an informal policy. While the financial savings may be significant, the risks are even more significant. Consider the research done by Soon Incorporated. The study polled 1,000 U.S.-based employees cross-industry and with roles ranging from small business owner to marketing to IT. They found that over 75% of the respondents reported they either didn't have or didn't even know if they had a BYOD policy in place. The 75% of respondents used whatever means they wanted to use for data transfer, for sensitive corporate documents. No organizational security measures were in place, thereby leaving their intellectual property and their knowledge base compromised. Looking at some more realities, currently, in an ever-increasing numbers, corporations are moving toward the borderless workplace with open bays, collaboration spaces, modular work environments, often for the dual purpose of controlling costs while trying to maximize productivity. However, the most recent research on that, which is Cisco's 2014 Connected World Technology Report, says that more than 60% of workers report that their current or future job searches will not be limited to their hometown or even their home country. That means the fight for talent is a global one. The flexible workplace with high engagement will be very attractive to the next diverse and dispersed superstar. We're finding more and more employees are struggling with that open bay environment, but it is key and essential to reconcile with in order to attract the newest and the brightest talent around the world. The other components that I'd like to talk about is that really 47% of the global workforce has some kind of flexible workplace arrangement. In combination with the increasing age spread of the workforce, meaning 5 generations in the workforce now, the flexibility will afford multinationals an opportunity to cover otherwise sparsely covered career fields and markets. So the flexibility is reported to have a positive psychological effect on top of everything else. Virtual workers are found to have a more positive view and perception of their job and organization than office-bound peers. So they're happier. As new technologies emerge, this job satisfaction is predicted to rise. A couple of things that are going to contribute to that, and Keisha, if you can advance one more. Instant machine language translation. Boy, that is coming up very, very quickly. In fact, there are handheld devices now that you can speak into that give you instantaneous translation. Now, the error rate is pretty high still on that, but it's coming. High-touch collaborative technologies that include visuals, file sharing, instant communication, and groupware are very, very important. Sophisticated video interfaces that simulate face-to-face. Now, they have been historically cost prohibitive, but what we see every month is the prices coming down in that virtual reality kind of environment. And so these are enabling workers to communicate effectively wherever and whenever it's convenient for them. Now, while virtual is having a positive effect on job perception and satisfaction, the worldwide employee engagement levels are very concerning. So before we go into that, I want to just kind of touch base with you again. And I'm curious about what systems your organizations have that support dispersed workforces. And so looking at formal team charters and kickoff processes, do you use collaborative technologies like shared workspaces, like I just mentioned? Do you have a learning platform that allows for sharing of assessment results and information and networking? Or do you have a database of best practices and after-action reports based on team and project success in the past so that that can be applied to the future? If other, go ahead and use the question box to help me understand what you're talking about. All right, so what do we have here, Lakeisha? All right, so it looks like technology, collaborative technologies like shared workspaces seems to be the most used. We have formal team charters and kickoff processes, learning platforms, and then other as well. So we'll take a look at that question box later. So collaborative technologies, that's excellent. Because of particular concern, we have 35% of the entire global workforce highly engaged. 35%. That means 65% of the workforce is disengaged. This is based on Towers-Watson and more recently the Gallup polling results. It's thoroughly proven that high engagement begets strong financial returns. In fact, according to Wharton professor Alex Admans, high employee engagement, nets double the stock return of the average firm. So how do we try and figure that out? Really, employee engagement is defined as the underlying psychological state in which employees feel a vested interest in their organization's success and are both willing and motivated to perform to levels that exceed the stated job requirements. So that's what you see on the very bottom. Engagement equals willingness and ability to go the extra mile. Follow that arrow up. And we're going to dig deep into this. How do you engage willingness? How do you get them to be willing to contribute and go the extra mile? And that is what we call E squared. We enable and we energize our teams and those around those teams and the members of those teams. And then E squared can be prodded, can be prompted and can be supported through two other constructs, which is constructive conversations, which is a model that I'll share with you in just a moment, and cultural competence, meaning the ability to really understand another person's perspective, whose background, understanding, and cultural norms are very different from ours. So considering the aforementioned 4 new skills demanded of professionals in the upcoming 5 to 10 years, according to Oxford Economics, really digital skills, agile thinking, interpersonal communication, and global operating skills are what we need to delve into. So let's take a look at these. We're going to go one by one through these and really understand what they look like in the workplace. So let's take a look first at digital skills. Let's move one more slide, Keisha. Really, our digital skills are key and essential. Of all technical capabilities, these digital business skills are seen as the most critical, and especially in Asia, where more traditional technologies have completely been leapfrogged. For instance, the home phone in India never caught on. The digital technology that allowed for cellular phones allowed them to leapfrog home landline phones. And in fact, now in the United States, very few homes have a landline, but we were reliant on them for many, many years. So these skilled technical workers specialize in the new forms of digital expression and marketing literacy, including the broad spectrum of social media, which is becoming more and more important. Fully 80% of corporate knowledge transfers take place through on-the-job transactions, both synchronous and asynchronous, in both micro-social environments like Yammer, that either corporations foster and support and enable with their employees, or if it's not fostered in the organization, it emerges outside of the corporate structure, and then the corporate structure has absolutely no influence over it. So we fully recommend that organizations take social media and really corporate knowledge transfer mediums very seriously, so that the sidebar conversations don't happen outside the organization. And really borders of space and time around work processes, people management, knowledge transfer, they're all disappearing. Multinationals and corporations are forced to not just cross, but transcend traditional socioeconomic and political boundaries. Conversations about controversial topics are happening, whether a corporate engages in that conversation or not. Dissatisfaction among cohorts travels very, very quickly, and it can break both a learning initiative and an organizational brand. So even more damaging, client or customer dissatisfaction spreads quickly, and it can snowball into petitions, social statements, very, very quickly. Social engagement allows for a constructionist approach also that engages the customers and the clients and the learners in co-development of the outcome. And really critical to creating this constructionist approach is allowing the audience to engage with each other. Process new information through prompting with questions, case studies, scenarios, and really learning from each other through situated discovery in their own experience. And this constructionist approach really emerged with the gaming industry. The gaming industry really started taking off when games allowed people to guide the development of the game and to author the development of the game. So one pause here is really in terms of our cultural orientations indicator, which is our proprietary assessment. We can help in this realm around digital skills by thinking of the thinking style dimension of the COI, specifically the multi and single focus continuum that helps describe how you process information in either a parallel or sequential method. Really, a recent Stanford University study in support of majority findings around multitasking found that in the deluge of information, it is critical skill to selectively focus attention for an extended period of time to reach a productive state. You may consider, and we recommend that you consider, varying your attention span into a 40-20 split. So that would be 1 hour where you split your time, 40 minutes spent in single focus, concentrated effort on a project or on a, a report that you have to get done. And then 20 minutes catching up on the multi-focus activities, meaning connecting with people, being able to take visitors within your own office, responding to social media, responding to instant messaging, and your email. So in concert with much of the research that's out there, we strongly recommend you focusing on a multi and single focus continuum of the COI to help support this initiative in your organization. So let's take a look at the second vital skill. It's termed Agile thinking skills. And we really attach this to the concept of VUCA. Now, VUCA was developed by the U.S. military to describe accurately what the military environment was like in overseas environments. So it is broken down into the terms volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it is now used extensively in the business environment to help us understand how absolutely important it is for us to be agile in how we adapt to different circumstances that come into play, different markets that we're entering, different product lines that we're trying to launch. It's a significant challenge to navigate this. According to the Corporate Leadership Council, they did a study called the Global Leader in 2011, which includes responses from 11,500 leaders at 35 different organizations. And what they found was that lack of intercultural skills is a marked derailer to business, but the difference between good and great intercultural skills isn't significant. So that's good news for us. We have to have intercultural skills. We have to have a level of cultural competence, but we don't have to be cultural scholars. We don't have to be interculturalists. We don't have to get our PhD in this topic in order to be effective. So in order for us to really build these skills, we can take another COI continuum, which is linear and systemic, to help us make sense of the chaos of the VUCA environment in a way that we most prefer, whether it's in an ordinal method that analyzes the situation step by step, which would be linear, or as a whole system, which is a systemic approach to it, and one that processes things from a holistic perspective. Okay, so let's take a look at the third skill. Really, this is an example. This is an example of VUCA. Let me pause just 1 second. So it's this cultural spectrum that we're going to share with you was developed by one of the leading financial firms in the world. And they built this cultural spectrum to illustrate the need for agile thinking skills across a complex workforce. The structure was designed over 1 year by an internal task force termed Asians in Asia. Project scope was to help untangle the complex cultural spectrum present in the region to further inform its people process or talent management in Asia. So let's take a look. The structure was designed in order for people to be able to decipher the complexities of the employee population, specifically in the Asia environment. So, for instance, so I would consider myself, based on my proximity and overseas assignments for 10 years first in Germany, then in Japan, and most recently in India. My experience just in India would put me in the bottom line, the third box from the left, which is global nomad. I worked in several different locations. I became culturally agile, but I had no local language skills to speak of. I knew how to say a couple of words to the taxi driver in a variety of the local languages, including Hindi, but I didn't have a local language capability. So I would categorize myself as a global nomad. So what kinds of categories would you put yourself in? Go ahead and use the question box to give me an example of where you would put yourself. Just reflect on this. And really, it's not a matter of putting yourself in a box. It's acknowledging the complexities of the workforce as it presents itself today. We are no longer, Chinese. We are no longer Indian. We have a very complex background. We have a very complex understanding. We might define ourselves more with the religious affiliation. We might define ourselves more with our gender affiliation. We might, define ourselves with, the complexity of cultures that we have been exposed to. If you've lived and worked in more than, 2 different environments, maybe you call yourself a third culture kid. Or third culture professional, which means you're more comfortable in an airplane than in any other specific culture. So very interesting, kind of approach to understanding the workforce in Asia by this financial firm. And it certainly isn't a prescriptive approach, but it's an exploratory approach to get to understand the workforce at a deeper level. So our third skill, now that we come to it, is the interpersonal and communication skills. And the global corporate shift from top-down leadership to more collaborative and fluid leadership style requires inclusive conversations. It requires us to foster co-creativity, brainstorming. Really, those are the core skills of relationship building and teaming, particularly when you're working in a virtual environment. And to hone our skills at this interpersonal level, the constructive conversation model really allows us as inclusive managers, team members, and leaders to engage in conversation. And this model weaves together objectivity, emotional intelligence, and all sprinkled with a clarity of expectations so that we're clear and concise and explicit in what we're communicating. And let me go through these steps. First step would be to describe your observations non-judgmentally. And those of you that know our cultural orientations indicator know that non-judgmental observation is the core of cultural competence. So for us to be able to observe and describe what's happening non-judgmentally is extremely important. And what I feel about it, this is where that emotional intelligence comes in, or the EQ. Describe how you feel about it and be able to use I language. I feel, I react, I get a little emotional, or I get a little agitated when people are late to meetings, for instance. The third step is how you interpret the situation with a focus on how you make sense of what's happening. So this is how I interpret what I observe. To me, this means some of the prompting ways that you can explore. Statement number 3 would be really to interpret what you observe based on your own interpretation. Certainly not saying this is what I think you're doing, rather to use that I language as a core. And then fourth step, again, goes back to the I language. It's to focus on the importance and significance of the situation for you and to articulate why it's important. And then that fifth and final step is the crucial step. Here's the change I want to see. Request a specific change. Don't just say, in the future, it'd be great if, right? That's a very benign way of saying, indeed, this is what the change is that I would like to see. And you're making a specific and measurable request. This also leads us very nicely into SMART goals and having SMART goal conversations. If you're aware of that SMART acronym, the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound acronym. So skill building here can take a continuum from the interaction style dimension of the COI as well, and that is the being-doing continuum. And really having a specific focus on developing that being side of our preference. And that's all about relationship building and relationship skills that allow the being preference to foster goodwill and trust between you and your colleague. And really that trust and goodwill can act as the foundation for execution of the task or the doing orientation. So let's look at that fourth and final skill, the critical skill termed global operating skills. This was a slide that I used for a client. Pardon me for having a client name on here, sorry about that. But really, global operating skills are the most important skill group to manage a diverse employee group and diverse product launch project management. So again, really looking at a shared service model as the basis for global operating skills. This is the matrix reporting structure. Shared service teams who are working remotely from each other to maximize follow-the-sun business models. So really, as one team signs off for the night, they hand the work to the shift just coming in for their work day halfway around the globe. However, multiple layers of complexity often get in the way of running the business effectively, like responsibility sharing, matrix reporting structures, virtual communication, and competing priorities, especially global and local supervisory responsibilities too. So really the geographic, functional, and regional models of organizations are intended to bring flexibility and locality to an operating structure, but they present overlap and turf-building tendencies that can derail organizational objectives. And I'll give you an example. You see the 787 Dreamliner graphic here, a famous case study about multi-regional, multinational sourcing models. It was initially hailed as a fine example of efficiency and budget-friendly capability, really available to the global business market. The 787 was comprised of 30% foreign-made and sourced parts. Now compare that with the 747, the previous, and still the best-selling airline that Boeing has ever made. The 747 that was and continues to be built with only 5% foreign-made parts. That is until the delays, the quality issues, and the public scrutiny pulled the process apart. 30% of the foreign-made and sourced parts made it a failed globalization model. Now, Boeing has put in an amazing amount of controls in order to manage that 30% foreign-made source parts structure, but it was a very, very hard lesson for them. Now, I wonder, really, if you can think about it to yourself, what services are distributed across your organization? Where are the critical collaboration points? And what systems do you have in place to keep building that collaborative structure? And the skill building in the global operating skills category can take another of the COI preferences, and that is in the control and the constraints continua. It's under the sense of self dimension, and really this helps you understand your preference and how you perceive the complexities of global operations as they relate to your area of control, or if you think everything is out of your control and it's based on environmental and social surroundings that really control how much influence you can have over a process or over something. And so that control and constraint continuum really could be an opportunity for deeper diving into the global operating skills capability building. So let me take you into really the last element of today's presentation, which is a focus on continuing to collaborate. And that is, how do you really initiate those diverse and dispersed employees, and how do you get them collaborating more effectively? And we can move to the next slide. So Intel, based on the work by Morton Hansen, you might have read his book Collaboration, engages their users and their employees across 3 foundational needs, and that is know me, feed me, and connect me. We're going to take a look at each one of these needs and how they can be addressed. So know me. What does that mean at an organizational level? Know your employees. That might look like this. Role-based collaboration engages team members across the entire organization. So you might connect developers, IT developers across the organization so that you can get to know them more effectively. in a sequence, in a context that is unique to their role and their interest areas. Communication also includes new features and varieties to engage team members across multiple intelligences, generations, and cultural preferences. So knowing them at that level will be incredibly important. And setting expectations from the start so team members know what will be expected and what they can expect as an outcome of that collaboration. So knowing, what's going to motivate them. And the COI can be used here to gain deeper insights into your own cultural preferences, and your individual results can help you be able to reveal that at the organizational level, at the team level, or the individual level. Feed Me is the second component of continuing to collaborate. It's based on Morton Hansen's collaboration book, as well as Intel's enactment of Morton Hansen's collaboration science. And that is to feed their employee base. They're really focused on web and mobile content delivery, so content's available when and where the team members want to access it. Their content is also context sensitive and just in time, so answers are within context and are easy to find because they're at their fingertips. Social, microsocial environments enable team members to share new ideas as well. I used the example of Yammer earlier, but information in nugget size and preserved for anybody that logs in after the conversation occurred. They can easily index, use the index of information and find that conversation that you had about that topic, whatever it is. And then providing ample support for enhanced performance through direct managers, learning and development augments, mentoring structures, and active management skills are important in the concept of Feed Me. The Cultural Navigator supports this with just-in-time learning opportunities, over 500 of them, with unique content on 108 different countries, over 500 learning components, and robust comparison features that not only you can leverage with your own COI results, but at the team level too. And then finally, Connect Me. This is the third element that Intel uses in how they enact Morton Hansen's collaboration science, and that is really building collaboration at all levels, both internal and external, not limiting it to internal only, but also including suppliers, including vendors, including customers in the conversation. Collaborative and social engagement that's topic-based, focused on information exchange, fostering a communication and a community of helping others be successful. And then really the Cultural Navigator does support that as well, and it enables paired work, team collaboration, and broader community engagement with a neutral, inclusive vocabulary to help describe and ultimately leverage the work style preferences present in the diverse and dispersed teams. So how do you manage all of this? How do you manage the impact of technology in order to maximize diverse and dispersed teams? Well, there are a couple of principles that we feel are critical for you. One is to identify clear goals and objectives, and that goes back to the team charter, and some of you shared that you definitely use team charters and organizational structures in order to kick off new teams. Working agreements is another component of really understanding how we're going to work together, and then enforcing those working agreements and re-engaging in conversation about those working engagements. So let's say your team is 2 months into the project, and you notice that the working engagements and the working agreements that you agreed to in the beginning are eroding. They're forgetting about it. They're not, hitting their weekly targets or their daily targets of, stand-up or weekly meetings. So revisiting those working agreements and making sure that they're part of your vocabulary. Active management is the third bullet there, and I can't stress this one enough. This used to be considered micromanaging, but in a diverse and dispersed workforce environment, active management is the most critical skill you can imagine, because what that allows you to do is keep pace with the change, keep pace with the activity that is happening. You have a dispersed work environment where you have people in 4 different geographies and 3 different functions all contributing to your project. In order to stay in touch with them, you need to set a rhythm of communication that allows active management to happen without being considered micromanagement. It's a rapid pace of conversation that allows you to stay informed as the team lead and allows everyone within the team to stay informed on progress. Speaking of the team lead, that next bullet is absolutely crucial as well, which is really teaching our team leads how to manage diverse and dispersed environments and workforces. We assume that because you're a manager, you would know how to manage people that you can't see and have, you know, a very different background than you. Well, we can't assume that anymore. We really need to actively train our employees that are in leadership roles and project manager roles. We encourage innovation in a different way as well. Risk aversion can be very culturally different across the globe. So what does innovation look like? And really the team lead has to set that pace, has to set that risk tolerance, and has to set the amount of energy that is devoted to innovation as opposed to the amount of energy that is devoted to actual productivity in the team. And then finally, and maybe even first, middle, and end, is to focus on the people. I don't know how many interviews I have read where, you know, leaders that have become extremely successful talk about the focus on people and how that has led to their success. The ability for them to walk in and make sure that they know that someone was just in the hospital, someone just had a baby, another one of their employees just got married, and to be able to keep pace with that and know their people inside and out as deeply as humanly possible. Now, with a dispersed and diverse workforce, that takes a lot of energy to focus on people, but it is well worth the time and effort for sure. Now, let's take us into actually evaluating our own multicultural team and diverse and dispersed workforce. We have a couple of different components that we look at in the 5 C's of high performance teams, and that is cohesion, collaboration, consensus, cooperation, and cultural competence. So we have a, this is the tenet of one of our teaming engagements, full day or 2-day workshop that engages teams and team leads. But let's take a look at your own sample here. We're going to ask you to evaluate your own team cultural competence. And we have a 1 through 5 evaluation score. And there we go. So we want you to evaluate your own team on this question. Team members value cultural differences for the unique and diverse contributions made to total team output. So is that consistently strong in your team? Is it dependable? Is it sometimes, infrequently, or never? So just to give yourself a little temperature gauge here on how important and how team members value cultural differences, let's take a look, Lakeisha. What does everybody say? Dependable. All right. Excellent. Okay. So we have some work to do, but it looks like we are doing well in terms of valuing cultural differences. We definitely want to continue to reflect on that. It's also very effective to take this kind of a quick quiz. Really, it's not an assessment. It's a quick quiz that helps you look at your own team's strengths and some areas that you can improve upon. So take those back to your teams and think about how you could utilize a line of questioning like that can help you dig deeper into the 5 C's of high performance multicultural teams or diverse and dispersed workforce. So we want to just look at what we've covered today and take a a quick peek at you know, the diverse and dispersed workforce. We took a look at the numbers around the world and linguistic requirements and the cultural complexity that comes with it. We know that we don't have to be experts, but we have to have cultural competence as a core. We looked at virtual realities, what some of the trends were, some roadblocks to engagement, and then, of course, the high demand skills. And then really those avenues of collaboration that allow us to continue our efforts, know, feed, and connect me. Now is the time for us to wrap up. I hope that you are able to evaluate today's session for us through next session and participating in our very next session. We have a webinar on a monthly basis, and we hope you're able to attend next month's session. Certainly welcome you back for that, and we will close. Thank you so much for attending today's session, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. We'll take the last amount of time that we have left in the hour and go through the question box and see what we can answer for you. But for purposes of recording, we will say goodbye. Thank you so much for your participation today. Thanks, Lakeisha. Bye-bye. All right. And so for those of you who are